People always thought I was the strong one until the day my daughter became the only reason I stood my ground. The air on Willow Creek was supposed to be filled with laughter that afternoon. Instead, it shattered with Patricia's voice, echoing sharp as sirens. "Remove it! Now! You're setting a bad example for everyone." Before I could even reach the fence, every phone was out, neighbors capturing the moment as if history was about to be rewritten in the span of a single command. Lily stood frozen, her hands gripping the edge of that painted canvas, her mother's last gift to this neighborhood, and our one untouchable memory. Around us, faces blurred into a wall of judgment and curiosity, waiting to see which would break first, the rules or us. What Patricia didn't realize was that this wasn't just a family defying an order. This was a promise being tested, a legacy on the line. And as cameras rolled and the street held its breath, I realized sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let someone else define what's sacred, no matter who's watching. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it was a spectacle, and the board president, with her perfectly pressed blazer and pursed lips, was making sure nobody missed it. She wielded her HOA badge like it was a weapon, holding it just high enough so the cameras would catch the shimmer. I knew what was coming next. The violation notice, the public shaming, the whispers on the Facebook group. But in that moment, something changed. A cold clarity settled over me. You know that feeling when a bully pushes too far and the crowd finally starts to question who's really in the wrong? That was the look I saw on a few faces that day. Neighbors who'd always kept their heads down, now staring at Patricia with something close to doubt. Let me make something clear. I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for a fight. My whole career, I worked behind the scenes, helping people shape their stories, control the narrative, make the truth shine a little brighter. But this was different. This was my story, and hers. That fence wasn't just wood and paint. It was a piece of my wife, a promise I'd made to keep her memory alive for Lily, no matter what it cost me. The board president must have thought her speech was the only one that mattered, but as I stepped closer, I could feel every eye turning. She didn't even look at me, just waved the violation slip like a flag. These rules are for everyone, no exceptions, not even for you, Adam. Her tone was pure ice, but I wasn't alone, not really. There were neighbors who remembered what that art meant, who remembered the old days before the new regulations and the new president. And there was Lily, still standing tall, her chin trembling, but her eyes fierce. In that instant, I realized I couldn't let this end the way Patricia wanted. If you've ever felt that knot in your chest, the one that tightens when someone you love is singled out, you'll understand why I didn't back down. There's a kind of silence that falls on a crowd when they witness a line being crossed, a collective breath held, as if everyone knows deep down that something important is happening. I could feel the weight of those gazes, some sympathetic, some just relieved that it wasn't their family in the spotlight. But underneath it all was a shared unspoken fear. What if next time it was them? Every year, that canvas went up for one day. One day for my daughter to feel close to her mother. One day for me to prove that promises can outlast grief. That's why Patricia's violation wasn't just about rules. It was about erasing something sacred. And if you've ever had to fight for something you thought you'd already lost, you know how hard it is to find your voice in front of a crowd. But sometimes, the line between victim and defender is thinner than you think. If you've ever watched someone finally stand up to a bully when the whole street holds its breath, drop a like or share this moment. Maybe your support is what gives someone else the courage to do the same. Because what happened next changed everything. Not just for me, not just for Lily, but for this whole street. The board president had picked the wrong family to test her power against, and she didn't even know it yet. Maybe she thought she could shame us into silence. Maybe she believed that badge gave her the last word. She was wrong. This wasn't just about a painting or a fence. It was about who gets to decide what matters in a neighborhood, and who has the courage to stand up when it's threatened. And as I faced Patricia, surrounded by neighbors and old friends, I realized I wasn't just protecting a memory. I was drawing a line in the sand for every person who'd ever felt powerless in their own home. The storm was only just beginning. I barely remember how we got home that evening. The street behind us was still buzzing, doors half open, kids whispering, a few adults glancing up from their phones. It was as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if the board president's version of order would stick, or if someone would finally push back. Lily trudged inside, her fingers still smeared with blue paint, silent, except for the quick, shuddering breaths she tried to hide. I set the canvas against the wall in the living room, right under the window where the late sun caught the streaks of yellow and green. That painting had always felt too big for the room. Tonight, the whole house felt small. I wanted to say something that would fix it all. Instead, I just sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through my phone. The festival group chat was already alive with messages, some parents angry, some quietly supportive, a few just sharing videos and gifs of Patricia's meltdown. Someone had even clipped the exact moment she snapped, the audio clear enough to catch her, words and the way my daughter flinched. For years, I'd avoided the politics of the HOA. Let others argue over parking and fences, I'd told myself. All I ever cared about was keeping my promise, to make this house feel like home for Lily, no matter how much had changed. But as I watched those clips replay, I could see this wasn't just another neighborhood squabble. The board president had turned it into a performance, and she wanted everyone to see us lose. A knock at the door broke my train of thought. It was Carla, our neighbor from across the street, holding a tray of cookies and looking nervous. "I saw what happened," she said, voice low. "If you need anything, just know you're not alone." I could see it in her eyes. The same uncertainty, the same fear of getting caught on Patricia's bad side. I thanked her, and she left quickly, glancing over her shoulder before ducking back inside. Later that night, Lily curled up beside me with a blanket. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. She just wanted to be close, maybe to borrow some of my strength, or maybe to remind me I wasn't the only one hurting. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one, each window glowing with secrets. I opened the HOA portal and scrolled through the newest policy posts. The board president's name was everywhere. Reminder: all community decorations must be approved in writing. Notice: no exceptions for memorials or personal displays. Report: incidents of non-compliance will be fined immediately. It was like reading the bylaws of a gated kingdom. In every post, her tone echoed the same message: my regulations or else. The messages kept coming. A neighbor down the block texted, worried that their own yard sign would be next. Someone else asked if I planned to appeal. Even a few board members chimed in, their words polite but evasive, as if afraid to pick a side. The community wasn't just watching. They were waiting for a signal, any signal, that things could be different. Sitting in that living room, I realized Patricia's strength came not just from the rules, but from the silence she imposed. If no one spoke up, her speech was the only one anyone ever heard. But tonight, with Lily's canvas prop beneath the window, with the messages and videos piling up, I could feel something shifting. The ground was less steady than the board president thought. It's easy to pretend nothing's wrong when trouble happens to someone else. But when you see your own story played out on a dozen tiny screens, the truth gets harder to ignore. I started noticing the little shifts in our community, an awkward glance that lingered a bit too long, a stilted wave from across the street, voices that dropped to a hush when we walked by. Our home, once a place of comfort and familiarity, had become a stage for everyone's uncertainty. Even my daughter seemed to shrink a little, careful now with how loudly she laughed, how close she stood to the windows. The comments under the video weren't all friendly, but enough were. Some people remembered the festival's history. Others wondered aloud when kindness had started feeling like a crime. I turned to Lily and promised quietly that I'd fix this. I didn't know how yet, but I wasn't about to let Patricia rewrite the rules for what family and community meant, not without a fight. I was done waiting for someone else to stand up. Out in the dark, the street looked peaceful again. But I knew better. The lines had been drawn, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one ready to cross them. I barely slept. Morning sunlight crept across the living room floor, cutting thin shadows through the half-closed blinds. The house was quiet, too quiet, but outside I could hear a distant lawnmower and the steady thump of sneakers on the sidewalk. The neighborhood was waking up, trying to pretend nothing had happened, but something had shifted, and I could feel it in my bones. I left Lily at the kitchen table with her cereal and walked down the street, feeling every set of eyes peeking through curtains as I passed. When I reached the Ellisons' house, a low brick place with a tidy front porch and a pair of ancient rocking chairs, I hesitated. Mark Ellison was outside, trimming a rose bush. His hands moved slowly and carefully, but his eyes were somewhere else. He looked older than I remembered. I almost turned around, but Mark caught my movement. He paused, the shears halfway open, and gave me a small, tired wave. "Morning, Adam." His speech was softer than usual, and he didn't quite meet my gaze. I noticed how his shoulders sagged, like he was carrying something heavy and didn't want anyone to see. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, the sound of the shears snipping, filling the gap between us. Mark cleared his throat, but instead of his usual neighborly banter, he just stared at the flowers, absently snapping a stem that wasn't even overgrown. His fingers trembled for a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then finally managed, "I saw what happened yesterday." His words were flat, but there was something raw under the surface. "I wish it hadn't. You know, I've gotten that far." He fidgeted with the shears, twisting them in his hands. He kept glancing over at the street, then back at the porch, as if he expected the board president herself to pop up behind a bush and take notes. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." I wanted to ask him why he hadn't said anything, why he hadn't stepped in. But the truth was, I already knew. Mark had always been part of the old guard, the board members who'd set up this community, watched it change, and quietly stepped aside when new blood like Patricia pushed in. He still carried the weight of all those years, and maybe some regret too. He finally set the shears down and wiped his hands on his jeans. His posture was stiff, like he was bracing himself for a blow. "Adam, you should know, things weren't always like this." His voice broke just a little, a quick tremor he tried to hide. "The board president, she means well, I think, but she's lost sight of what this place is supposed to be." I could see the conflict etched across his face, the way his brow furrowed, the way he kept shifting from foot to foot, the way he couldn't seem to keep his hands still. Mark wanted to say more, maybe even apologize, but something held him back. Fear, habit, or maybe just the sheer force of Patricia's personality. He kept glancing at the sidewalk, watching neighbors pass, lowering his speech each time a car rolled by. "I'll let you get back to your morning," he finally muttered, picking up the shears again. But he didn't start trimming. He just stood there, staring at the roses, shoulders hunched against the sun. I watched him for a second, trying to decide if I should push harder. But sometimes you have to let people wrestle with their own ghosts. As I walked back home, I kept replaying that awkward exchange. Mark wasn't a bad man, not by a long shot, but he was caught between loyalty to old friends and the reality unfolding on his own street. I knew that conflict, the tug of comfort versus conscience. It was all over his face, in the way he could barely look at me, in the way his hands shook when he thought nobody was watching. Inside, Lily was waiting, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the street through the window. I sat beside her, feeling the weight of Mark's silence settling on my shoulders too. Change never starts easy. Sometimes the first cracks appear, not in angry speeches or bold acts, but in the quiet discomfort of someone who finally realizes they can't stay silent forever. Mark's hesitation was more than just fear of confrontation. It was the pain of watching something he'd helped build slowly unravel. There was a time when he took pride in every decision, every policy that shaped the neighborhood. Now, he looked back at those choices with regret, wondering if, by stepping back, he'd allowed the wrong voices to grow louder. And somewhere deep down, I hoped Mark would find his speech, because if this fight was going to mean anything, I couldn't win it alone. The clubhouse always felt colder in the morning, all polished floors and fake plants under buzzing fluorescent lights. I walked in with Lily at my side, our footsteps echoing a little too loudly as we crossed the empty lobby. On weekends, this place was full of laughter, kids dragging pool noodles, neighbors swapping stories. Today, the only voices were hushed. The receptionist didn't even look up. The board president was already there, holding court near the glass display case filled with outdated trophies and faded newsletters. She had 2 other board members with her, smiling, nodding, doing their best impressions of impartial judges. But even from across the room, you could feel the chill in her stare. She gestured for me to wait, finishing up with a couple who looked as tense as I felt. As they left, their eyes met mine for half a second, an unspoken warning maybe, or a silent apology. Patricia turned her attention to me, lips curled into that signature smile of hers. "Mr. Holt." "You're here about the violation, I assume?" "She didn't ask," she announced. Her tone filled every corner of the lobby. Lily's hand tightened around mine. I kept my face calm, but my pulse hammered in my ears. The board president launched straight into it, reading off infractions from a crisp white clipboard. Unauthorized display of artwork, failure to obtain advance approval, community disruption. She rattled off the charges as if she was reading a weather report, not dismantling a child's memory. Her voice never wavered. Every word sounded rehearsed. I listened, biting back every urge to interrupt. If I snapped now, I'd just play into her hands. Patricia wanted a scene. She wanted evidence that I was the troublemaker. Instead, I let her finish and asked quietly, "Is this how we handle family traditions now?" She bristled, flipping a page. "We handle all violations equally. It's about fairness." But there was something defensive in the way she shifted her weight. A quick glance at the other board members as if checking for backup. One of them cleared his throat. The other looked at his shoes. The board president slid a printed notice across the counter. "You have until tomorrow to remove the painting and pay the fine, or further action will be taken. I suggest you comply, Mr. Holt." I took the paper, hands steady even though my insides churned. I caught a glimpse of Lily's reflection in the lobby window, small, tense, her jaw set in the same stubborn line I'd seen 100 times before. This was more than an artwork. This was about dignity, about not letting someone else decide what mattered to our family. Patricia dismissed me with a practiced smile, already turning to her next task. As I walked away, I heard her speech behind me, lower but still sharp. Some people never learn. We stepped outside into bright sunlight, the kind that makes everything look more real. Lily blinked hard, brushing away a tear before I could see. I wanted to promise her it would all be okay, but empty words wouldn't help. Not this time. I folded the notice into my pocket and let the frustration settle, heavy and hot. The board president was more relentless than I'd realized. She had the rules and the board behind her, at least for now. But she didn't have the truth, and she didn't have the story. That was still mine to tell. As we walked back through the parking lot, I noticed a few familiar faces watching from their cars. Carla nodded at me, her eyes wide. Even from a distance, I could sense the worry rippling through the community. That walk felt longer than any I'd taken in years. Each step, I could almost hear the whispers, neighbors discussing us in low tones, some questioning whether to step in or stay safely on the sidelines. The sun was bright, but the shadows between houses felt stretched and uncertain, filled with the questions nobody wanted to ask aloud. People were paying attention, even if they didn't say it out loud. Maybe they were waiting for someone else to step forward. Maybe they were hoping I wouldn't back down. All I knew was that Patricia had just drawn her line in the sand, and if I wanted any hope of protecting my daughter, the memories her mother left behind, and whatever was left of this community's spirit, I'd have to fight on ground she didn't control. The board had their regulations. I had my resolve. Now, the real work was about to begin. By late afternoon, the sun was already slipping behind the houses, stretching long shadows across our street. I stood at the edge of Carla's backyard, the grass still damp beneath my shoes, and waited while she fussed with her phone. Her husband, Luis, was grilling in the corner, pretending not to eavesdrop, though I caught him glancing over more than once. Carla handed me her phone. The video paused at the moment the enforcer's voice hit its cruelest note. "I wasn't the only one recording," she whispered. "Half the street has this. Some people even have better angles." She showed me a group chat full of shared clips, the enforcer's words, Lily's face, the crowd's uneasy shuffle, all from different perspectives. The neighborhood's private network was buzzing, more alive than I'd ever seen. We huddled close, going over timestamps and audio. There were shaky low-res shots from across the road, and one almost cinematic clip from the upper balcony of the Wong's house. Each new angle revealed something more. The look on my daughter's face as Patricia leaned in, the way the board members hovered behind, awkward and uncertain, and, most importantly, the reactions of our community. Discomfort, shock, a ripple of outrage that even a camera couldn't hide. Luis came over with a plate of grilled corn, setting it down between us as if he couldn't bear to stay uninvolved. "People are talking, Adam. Most folks don't want trouble, but nobody liked what she did." He kept his voice low, glancing toward the back fence. Everyone's waiting to see what happens next. I thanked him, feeling the weight of expectation. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. The enforcer's public humiliation had left a mark on more than our family. It had shaken something loose in the whole community. If I played this right, maybe I could channel that unrest into something real, something that might finally challenge the way things had always been. Carla tapped her phone again. You know the Smiths on Maple? Their daughter had her soccer trophy taken off the porch. Last week, Patricia said it was visual clutter. And last month, the Olivers got a notice for a garden gnome. She shook her head, lips pressed tight. People are scared, but they're tired too. We spent the next hour compiling clips, screenshots, and old messages. I started a shared drive, uploading everything. By the time I left, I had a digital folder full of neighborhood discontent, and a quiet promise from Carla that she'd spread the word. Luis offered to talk to the neighbors on his end, just to see what people are really thinking. As I walked home under the soft glow of porch lights, I felt the shift. For the first time, the evidence wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. The power Patricia had wielded so confidently was starting to slip, replaced by something she couldn't control. A groundswell of ordinary people, united not by anger, but by a stubborn sense of fairness. Back inside, I showed my daughter some of the messages, just the kind ones, the offers of support, the little reminders that the world could still be kind. Her eyes flickered with something like hope. For a moment, she even smiled. Later that night, I organized the files, labeling each clip by location and time. I reached out to the Smiths, the Olivers, and anyone else whose story Carla had mentioned. Each reply came back quickly, sometimes with more footage, sometimes just with thanks. The shared drive grew, piece by piece, into a mosaic of quiet resistance. As I built the archive, I realized how many stories had gone untold for so long, dozens of small injustices, each one dismissed as an isolated incident. Together, they painted a different picture, a neighborhood learning to fear its own rules, families second-guessing the simple joys of a painted porch or a child's drawing taped to a window. It was a tapestry of resilience, stitched together by the quiet courage of people who'd finally had enough. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, headphones on, listening to the enforcer's speech again and again. Each repetition made me angrier, but also more certain. This was bigger than a painting or a single violation. It was about who got to decide what mattered and whose stories would finally be heard. The plan was coming together, slowly, but with a momentum I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I'd start reaching out further. There were more voices to gather, more angles to capture, more truth to stitch together. For once, Patricia wouldn't control the narrative. Not anymore. I waited in the car, watching students spill out of the school's double doors in small, noisy clusters. Most looked like any other Friday afternoon. Backpacks slung, sneakers dragging, voices loud and careless. But Lily was different. She walked with her shoulders pulled tight, her eyes glued to the ground, moving like she was trying to disappear into the concrete. She spotted me and hurried over, climbing into the passenger seat, without a word. For a minute, I just let the silence hang between us. I could feel her anger simmering beneath the surface, coiled up and ready to break. "Rough day?" I asked quietly, searching her face for answers she wasn't ready to give. She shrugged. "It's everywhere, Dad. The videos, the comments." Her voice was barely a whisper. "People keep tagging me. Some are just mean. Some think it's funny. No one remembers why we even put the painting up. They just see the drama." Her hands balled into fists in her lap. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." For a moment, I hated Patricia with a clarity I hadn't felt before, not just for what she'd done, but for the way her cruelty had spilled out of our yard and into my daughter's world. I wanted to protect my daughter, to pull her out of the mess and give her something solid to hold on to. But there was no easy fix. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. A group of kids walked past, throwing glances into the car, and Lily turned away, pressing her forehead to the window. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "You know this isn't your fault, right? You did nothing wrong." She didn't answer, but I saw her nod just a little. The hurt was still there, but behind it, something else. A spark I recognized from years ago, the same stubborn will her mother had. I took a deep breath and let my words come out slow and steady. I'm not going to let this go, my daughter. Not this time. I promised your mom I'd protect you. I won't let anyone take that away. As we drove home, I kept thinking about the way Patricia wielded the regulations like armor, certain she could outlast anyone who challenged her. But she hadn't counted on what this struggle meant for us. This wasn't about artwork anymore. It was about dignity, memory, and belonging. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter. I was fighting for every family who'd felt powerless in the face of petty authority. Back in the house, I set up my laptop and pulled up the growing folder of videos and messages. For weeks I'd hesitated, waiting for someone else to draw the line. But as I watched my daughter disappear into her room, her pain echoing through the walls, I made up my mind. I'd take this story public. I'd use every skill I had, every contact, and every piece of truth to show people what was really happening on our street. I started drafting a statement, careful, honest, and clear, not an attack, but a plea for understanding. I reached out to an old friend from my days in the news, asking if she'd take a look. I knew I couldn't control how the story would land, but I could make sure the heart of it, the love, the loss, the injustice, wouldn't be twisted by someone else's agenda. That night, I sat at Lily's bedside, watching her breathe, her face finally soft with sleep. I remembered her mother's words, how hope was always worth more than fear, how standing up for what's right is never a mistake, even if it hurts. I closed my eyes and let those words settle inside me, steeling myself for the struggle ahead. By morning, the plan was simple. No more silence, no more waiting for Patricia's next move. I would fight back, with the truth, and with all the voices our neighborhood had tried to hush. For my daughter, for her mother, for every family on our street. I made a silent vow to myself, right there in the early morning light. I wouldn't let Lily carry this weight alone, not now, not ever. If the enforcer wanted a battle of willpower, she'd get one. But this time, the fight wouldn't happen in the dark or behind closed doors. This would be a battle in the open, witnessed by everyone who'd ever felt powerless. And I would make sure they knew they weren't invisible. It was late afternoon when I saw Mark sitting alone on the bench by the lake. The wind was busy with the reeds, scattering sunlight over the water. For a while, I just stood beneath the willow tree, watching him watch the ripples. There was something about his posture, a little hunched, hands clasped tightly, gaze fixed on the horizon. That told me this wasn't an ordinary day for him either. I walked over and sat at the far end of the bench, leaving space between us. Mark didn't look up right away. His fingers fidgeted with the wedding ring on his left hand, turning it back and forth, as if searching for answers in the grooves. After a minute, he spoke, voice low and uncertain. "Adam, I know I should have done something sooner. I saw the way Patricia talked to your girl." He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm not proud of what this place has become. I helped build it, you know? When we first set up the HOA, we just wanted a place people could be proud of. Not this." He finally met my eyes. The guilt there was heavy, but so was something else. Resolve, maybe, or the beginning of it. "I've got something you need to see," he said, pulling a slim folder from his bag and holding it between us like contraband. Inside were printouts and old emails, board messages, policy drafts, lists of complaints, all signed or pushed through by the enforcer. Some dated back months, others just days. I scanned through them, heart racing. The pattern was unmistakable. The same handful of families targeted again and again, minor violations blown out of proportion, fines escalated for repeat offenders. But what caught my eye were the comments. Patricia's own words preserved in black and white. "Make an example, push for compliance, don't let sentiment cloud judgment." It was all there, proof of her agenda, not just against us, but against anyone who stepped out of line. Mark looked away as I read, his knuckles white. I should have stopped it. I should have spoken up when the board started turning into her private court. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he seemed so much older, worn down by the weight of choices unmade. He took a deep breath, the lake breeze fluttering his jacket. "You have to use this, Adam. You have to show people what's really happening. Most folks here don't want to fight, but they'll follow if someone leads." He glanced at the folder in my lap, then back at me. "I can't fix what I let happen, but I can help you set it right." I nodded, words caught in my throat. This was what I needed. A witness who knew the rules from the inside, a friend brave enough to cross the line. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked, still trying to read the war on his face. He gave a sad little smile. "It's about time. I've spent too long sitting on this bench, waiting for things to change on their own." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope and fear in equal measure. Mark's help wasn't just a lifeline for me. It was a signal to every silent neighbor, every family afraid to speak up, that the tide could finally turn. We sat together for a while, watching the sunlight fade, the weight of secrets slowly lifting. With Mark's evidence in hand, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The fight was no longer just mine. The bench grew cold beneath us, but I felt a strange warmth in my chest, a fragile hope that maybe, finally, the tide was shifting. Mark wasn't just giving me documents, he was lending me the backbone of the old community, a reminder that what made Willow Creek special wasn't its bylaws or manicured lawns, but the people who dared to care for each other. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of my laptop and the rhythmic tick of the old clock above the desk. Outside, the street had surrendered to darkness, just a handful of porch lights still burning. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, her book splayed across her chest. I watched her for a moment, her face calm in sleep, before heading back to my office and closing the door behind me. I stared at the folder Mark had given me, letting the gravity of what I now held settle in. This wasn't just about me and my daughter anymore. It was about a pattern, a record, a deliberate twisting of what a community was supposed to be. I thought about Patricia, her ironclad smile, and her certainty that regulations were shields no one could pierce. She didn't realize those same rules were about to become her undoing. I spread the evidence across my desk. Printouts, screenshots, video files, messages from the community, old newsletters, policy drafts. Each piece felt like a puzzle coming together. I mapped out a timeline, every incident, every target, every time the enforcer pushed just a little further. I color-coded emails, highlighted notes, and clipped the most damning video moments. The wall beside my desk was soon covered with sticky notes, connections traced with lines and arrows, each fact pointing to a single, relentless campaign. As I worked, a surge of my old professional instincts kicked in. Years. In broadcast news had taught me how to tell a story, how to make a case stick in the court of public opinion. I drafted a clean, factual statement, one that would put faces to the names, stories to the violations, and show exactly how Patricia had turned neighbor against neighbor. I wasn't out for blood. I just wanted the truth, plain and unvarnished. I set up a shared online drive for the community, organizing everything so anyone could access it. Then I began reaching out, messages to parents, business owners, the quiet residents who'd stayed on the sidelines. "You're not alone," I wrote. "We're stronger together. If you have a story, let's make it heard." The responses came in waves. Some replied within minutes, sharing screenshots, texts, even old voicemail messages from the enforcer's late-night reminders. Others simply wrote thank you, relieved to know someone was finally connecting the dots. A few were hesitant, scared of retribution, but even those confided their frustration and hope in small, private ways. By midnight, I'd compiled a dossier, a digital case file that anyone in the neighborhood could see, complete with links to every video, every message, every document Mark had provided. I ran through the plan in my head, checking for holes, anticipating Patricia's countermoves. This wasn't just about exposure, it was about empowering the people she'd tried to silence. Before logging off, I reached out to Ava, my old friend at the local paper. I sent her the evidence, a brief overview, and asked if she'd be willing to take a closer look. She responded within the hour, promising to run it by her editor. "This is good work, Adam. The kind of story people need to see." As I finally leaned back in my chair, exhaustion warred with a bright, anxious energy. For the first time, the scales felt tipped, just enough for a real chance at justice. Lily's artwork still leaned against the wall, the colors faded in the lamplight, but stubbornly vivid. It was a reminder of why any of this mattered. That painting had become more than a symbol of loss. It was a badge of survival. Every brushstroke whispered the memories of quieter days, of laughter echoing through rooms now too silent. As the world outside threatened to shrink around us, the canvas became a defiant shout that our story was worth telling, no matter who tried to erase it. The road ahead was still uncertain. Patricia would struggle, of that I had no doubt. But now she'd be fighting a whole community, not just a single father and his daughter. I switched off the lamp and stood for a moment in the quiet, letting hope settle in my chest. Tomorrow, the story would begin to spread, and for once, the truth wouldn't be easy to bury. The sun was setting when I crossed the street, my phone buzzing with new messages every few minutes. Carla's backyard was already filling up, dozens of voices blending with the smell of grilling vegetables and fresh-cut grass. For the first time in weeks, the mood felt almost hopeful, a nervous energy buzzing just below the surface. People were tired, yes, but ready for something to change. Luis greeted me with a nod, waving me over to a picnic table cluttered with laptops, notepads, and plates of half-eaten food. Carla moved through the crowd, ushering nervous neighbors toward the table. "If you want your story told, Adam's the one to trust," she told them, her words soft but urgent. I spent the next hour listening. One by one, families shared what they'd been through: garden gnomes confiscated, basketball hoops taken down, warning letters piling up for minor infractions. Some had old screenshots, others forwarded angry emails from Patricia, the digital evidence piling up as fast as the voices. Each story was a puzzle piece, fitting perfectly with the pattern Mark and I had uncovered. I helped people draft statements, simple and honest. I was targeted for, I received. This is how it made me feel. It wasn't just about the facts, it was about the effect, the anxiety, the isolation, the feeling that home wasn't safe. Even the quieter community, those who'd never shown up at a board meeting, found their voices, emboldened by the sense of unity. Carla kept a careful eye on the backyard gate, just in case the enforcer's shadow showed up. But tonight, there was no sign of her, only the hum of community finally sharing what they'd kept hidden. The stories overlapped, weaving a tapestry of frustration, fear, and, now, defiance. Luis helped set up a projector, and, as dusk deepened, we watched the best video clips together, the evidence now a shared memory. People gasped and shook their heads at Patricia's words, and a few even laughed, not out of mockery, but relief. For once, the power was shifting. What had once been shameful was now fuel for change. By the time darkness settled in, we'd collected a small mountain of statements and digital files. I organized everything on my laptop, uploading new evidence to the shared drive and tagging each piece for easy access. Carla helped me make a list of who would be willing to speak out publicly and who wanted to remain anonymous, at least for now. As we packed up, a few neighbors lingered, unsure but grateful. "I never thought we could do this," one woman admitted, her hands trembling as she handed me a stack of HOA notices. "I always thought it was just me." I shook my head. "It was never just you. That's how they want you to feel. But not anymore." We finished under the porch light, promising to meet again soon. The plan was in motion, a coordinated release of stories, a wave of evidence that couldn't be ignored. I could see determination flicker in people's eyes, a readiness to stand together. The air buzzed with a strange kind of energy, nervous, excited, a little scared. For years, the only power the board had was the silence of the people. It ruled. Now, for the first time, that silence was breaking. It was as if everyone was waking up at once, blinking in the new light of possibility. Drop a like if you've ever wished someone would finally stand up to neighborhood bullies. Every tap helps our stories reach the people who need them most. Back at home, I called Mark to update him. His relief was clear, a quiet pride in his speech. "You did good, Adam. You did real good." As I sat at my desk, staring at the files and faces on the screen, I realized the fight had changed. It was no longer a solitary battle. We were ready, united, organized, and unwilling to let fear win again. Tomorrow, we'll take the next step. And for the first time, Patricia would be the one on the defensive. The kitchen had become our war room, laptops spread across the table, half-empty mugs crowding the counter, the air thick with anticipation. Lily hovered by the fridge, scrolling through her phone, while I fielded messages from neighbors, Mark, and Carla, each ping bringing new details or last-minute worries. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the whole house buzzed with the nervous excitement of people about to do something that mattered. We'd decided to launch the campaign at 9 sharp. All at once, the videos, screenshots, and statements would hit the community's social media feeds, our shared drive, and inboxes across Willow Creek. The plan was simple: Overwhelm the enforcer's narrative with the truth, loud, undeniable, and impossible to spin. We had volunteers ready to tag local news, school groups, and anyone with a stake in the neighborhood's future. My daughter's fingers drummed on the kitchen table. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked, her voice tight with hope and fear. "I don't know," I admitted, giving her a small smile. "But we're not alone anymore. That's what counts." I looked around at the others, Carla setting up her laptop, Luis reviewing last-minute talking points, even Mark, who'd stopped by on his morning walk just to lend quiet moral support. For the first time, it felt like we had numbers on our side. 9 o'clock came faster than any of us expected. I sent the first post, a short video montage, faces and stories layered over shots of the fence, the painting, and Patricia's confrontation. Within seconds, the notifications started rolling in. People shared, commented, sent private messages. The evidence spread like wildfire. Carla texted me, "Local reporter wants to talk." Sending them your way, Luis forwarded a message from a neighboring HOA. "We saw what you posted, dealing with something similar here. How did you organize?" Every few minutes, another story surfaced. Someone adding their own speech, someone standing up after months, maybe years, of feeling powerless. The momentum was real, and it was growing. Patricia was quick to respond. Within the hour, she posted a long message to the HOA page, denouncing rumors, doctored videos, and coordinated misinformation. She called for calm and respect, urging residents to remember the rules that kept Willow Creek beautiful. But the comments beneath her post told a different story, people pushing back, demanding accountability, sharing their own run-ins with the board. For the first time, the enforcer's voice wasn't the only one that mattered. Lily watched the reactions pour in, her anxiety slowly shifting to amazement. She looked up, eyes shining. "Dad, people are actually listening." I squeezed her hand. They always wanted to. They just needed to see they weren't alone. By midday, the house felt like the center of a storm. My phone rang nonstop, neighbors wanting advice, local media asking for interviews, old friends reaching out in support. Even Mark, usually reserved, found himself fielding calls from residents who remembered him as the board's speech of reason. The real surprise came around noon, when Carla burst through the door with a wide-eyed grin. "You did it," she said. "Patricia just called an emergency board meeting. The whole neighborhood's invited." We gathered around the table, everyone a little breathless, a little shocked at just how quickly things had moved. "This is our chance," I told them. "We show up. We speak out. No more silence." The storm was no longer brewing. It was here. And for the first time, I felt certain that we'd be the ones standing when it passed. I looked at Lily, her face shining with nervous pride, and felt the enormity of what we'd started. All those nights spent worrying, all the whispered fears, they had led to this moment. Whether we won or lost, we'd already changed the story. And sometimes, that's where real victory begins. The community clubhouse was packed, the buzz of anxious voices bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. I'd never seen so many people turn out for a board meeting, neighbors who'd spent years keeping to themselves, now filling every folding chair, standing along the walls, even spilling into the hallway. A local news van idled outside, its satellite dish pointed skyward, camera crew at the ready. The old familiar place, once a symbol of small-town peace, now felt electric, charged with possibility and nerves. Patricia stood at the head of the room, flanked by the other board members. Her posture was rigid, her face set in a smile that was equal parts challenge and strain. For a moment, she held the microphone as if she might use it to restore order with a single word. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice calm but tight. "I want to address the unfortunate rumors circulating online and in our community. Let's remember, the rules are here to protect us all." The words barely landed before a ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Mark caught my eye from his seat near the front. His presence alone was enough to draw notice, the old guard now breaking ranks. Lily sat beside me, holding her phone, recording every word. Carla and Luis hovered at the edge of the crowd, ready to speak if called on. The enforcer pushed on, but the mood had shifted. People raised their hands, interrupted, and demanded answers. A father at the back stood up, his speech trembling but steady. My son's basketball hoop was removed without warning. We never even got a chance to appeal. Why? Others chimed in, some angry, some sad. A grandmother described being fined for hanging wind chimes. A young couple explained how their welcome mat had been deemed offensive. The stories poured out, voices layering one atop the other, the sheer number impossible to dismiss. I felt my daughter squeeze my arm. "You ready?" she whispered. I nodded and stood up as the room fell into a restless hush. "My name's Adam Holt," I said, meeting the enforcer's eyes. "I've lived here for nearly a decade. I never imagined I'd have to fight this hard to hang a piece of art my daughter and her mother made together. But this isn't just about me, or my daughter, or even the fence. It's about a community where one speech has drowned out the rest for too long." Mark rose next, the crowd watching closely. He cleared his throat, gripping the podium. "I was here when we built this place. The HOA was meant to keep things fair, not to punish families for being themselves. We've lost sight of that, and I take responsibility for my part in it. The enforcer, I can't support what's happened under your leadership." Gasps. A few people clapped, others whispered. For the first time, Patricia faltered, her mask cracking. The news crew caught every moment. Carla read statements from other neighbors. Luis handed out copies of the evidence, the emails, the videos, the patterns that couldn't be denied. The board tried to respond, but their words sounded thin, defensive. The tide had turned. People began to call for a vote, right there in the open. Some demanded new elections, others proposed policy changes. It was messy, emotional, and completely unstoppable. The sense of relief was palpable. The room felt lighter, as if a long, tense breath had finally been let go. By the end, Patricia was cornered by the press, her usual composure slipping away. The meeting dissolved into groups, neighbors hugging, some crying, others just grateful it was finally out in the open. As people lingered, trading stories and making new plans, I realized how long it had been since anyone had truly felt heard in this room. The walls, once covered in sterile notices and impersonal rules, now rang with the messy, beautiful noise of real community. For the first time, I saw hope blooming, not just in my own heart, but in the faces of everyone who would risk speaking up. As my daughter and I walked out into the night, the clubhouse behind us still lit up and buzzing, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. Morning sunlight spilled through the living room windows, warming the old wooden floors and glinting off the artwork propped beneath the window. The same painting that had started it all. For the first time in weeks, the house felt light again. The tension that had settled into the walls had lifted, replaced by something gentler, relief, and the faint thrill of new beginnings. The aftermath of the meeting had swept through Willow Creek like a cleansing rain. News spread fast. Patricia had officially resigned, her statement posted online before noon. The board announced immediate elections, promising more transparency and fair policies. Neighbors, once wary of each other, now stopped to chat at mailboxes and on morning walks. For the first time in a long while, the community felt like it belonged to everyone again. Lily's phone buzzed with messages from classmates, some apologizing, others congratulating her for standing up. She smiled more easily now, her eyes brighter. The artwork, once a symbol of loss and conflict, had become something new, a banner of resilience, a reminder that memories and hope could survive even the most determined efforts to erase them. Out in the park, the fence was already dotted with new artwork, flowers, and homemade signs. Kids ran back and forth, adding their own touches. The old guard of the neighborhood, Mark among them, helped hang a banner that read, "Willow Creek belongs to us all." Carla and Luis organized a small picnic, laughter echoing across the grass. Even some of the quietest families came out, drawn by the promise that things really could be different. I stood by the fence, tracing my fingers over the grain of the wood. It felt solid, familiar. I thought about Lily's mother, about the promises we keep and the ones we struggle to make real. I remembered Mark's face at the meeting, the way his voice had steadied as he chose to do what was right. I saw my neighbors, no longer just bystanders, but allies. I realized that this fight had never been just about rules or paintings or violations. It has always been about who we choose to be when confronted with injustice, about the courage it takes to speak up, even when your speech trembles. Change had come, not because of a single act, but because ordinary people had found their control together. There's a quiet power in knowing you're not alone, in seeing your pain reflected and answered in the eyes of others. Our community, battered but unbroken, had chosen to reclaim its story, and in doing so, we'd given one another a gift more valuable than any victory over the board, the belief that we mattered and that together we could write a better future. My daughter slipped her hand into mine as we watched the crowd, her smile quiet but sure. "You kept your promise, Dad." I squeezed her hand. "We kept it. All of us." The world won't always change with a single story, but sometimes one is enough to spark the next and the next, until even the strongest walls can't keep hope out. If you believe in standing up to unfair rules, hit subscribe and share your story. Your voice might give someone else the courage to fight back.